Hi everyone, Coyote Montana here, and today is May 18th, 2025, and today's the day of the tragic event that happened in Washington State. And it's the volcano that had a big eruption, and it's this one, Mount Saint Helens. Now, how did it go from this to a nice cone shape to something like that? Well, there's a big story about this. And I wasn't even born yet when this happened, but my dad saw the news, of course. And I actually did mention Mount Saint Helens in the last few videos when I mentioned about volcanoes, tsunamis, earthquakes. Yeah. I actually mentioned Mount Saint Helens on there. Now, Mount Saint Helens is one of the volcanoes in Washington State, of course. And it's also part of this mountain range called the Cascades. So it's one of the Cascade volcanoes, of course, of the US. Yeah, so the Cascade mountain range is a line of 13 volcanoes. And the 13 volcanoes are Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, Mount Rainier, Mount Adams, Mount Saint Helens, Mount Hood, Mount Jefferson, Three Sisters, Newberry, Crater Lake, Medicine Lake, Mount Shasta, and Lassen Peak. Those are the 13 volcanoes of the U.S. of the Cascades. Of course. Now Mount Saint Helens used to have this nice cone shape, and it was nicknamed Mount Fuji of North America. And why it was called Mount Fuji of North America before it became what it is? Well, it used to have a nice perfect cone shape, just like the one volcano in Japan that we know of, Mount Fuji, because Mount Fuji has a cone shape, and Mount Saint Helens used to have a nice perfect cone shape just like Mount Fuji. Now, there was an actual eruption that happened around the 1800s, which is 1857. There's actually a painting of it, and that eruption was catastrophic before 1980. So the volcano was dormant for over 100 years until awoken in the spring of 1980. And how did it happen? There was some earthquakes happening, which means it was awakening. So some scientists were keeping a watch on it. And then there's this other scientist named Dave, who sadly died from the eruption, was keeping on the watch too. And they were thought that it was going to come out of the cone, out of the crater, but there was one thing that actually hints it. There was a huge bulge. Is it a bulge? Yeah, a huge bulge. There was a huge bulge on the north side of Mount Saint Helens. They don't know why, but it used to be a perfect cone shape until that bulge happened. And what caused it was the magma. It was starting to go up, and then it was starting to go this way. That's when it happened. And later on, around May 18th of 1980, there was another big earthquake, and that's when the eruption happened. And there was a big landslide on the north side, and that's where it erupted out. There's actually footage of it. 2 of them, of course. There's one that shows the landslide of the eruption, and then a second one that was taken from a helicopter. And it's old, too, because I saw the black and white dots. So that eruption was catastrophic. And it also caused a tsunami in Spirit Lake. Of course, because of the big landslide. And a bunch of people died from the eruption. And even the pyrastic flow started to go towards the east of the US and heads towards the other states, causing a lot of money to get everything fixed. Even a bunch of trees died from the eruption, which is really which is sad. Yeah. And people thought that Mount Saint Helens would never erupted again because of after that, but it actually did erupt again around 2004 and up to 2008. That's how you can tell that it's still alive. And what I heard And what I actually heard is that the volcano is actually reforming its cone shape to its pre-1980 eruption. So that means it's actually going to go back to its actual cone shape again, which could take 200 years, which is a really long time. And I won't be around when the cone is now back into its shape. Yeah, and there's a lot of documentaries of Mount Saint Helens, different ones, and also ones from other documentary series like American Volcano for Mega Disasters, and even they talked about it on how the Earth was made, which I don't have on DVD yet, but I'll be planning to get it on DVD, of course, so I can be able to watch it. And maybe my dad should actually watch it too. And that scientist, Dave, ever since you actually saw pictures of him, yeah, he died from the eruption because the pyrastic flow was coming right towards him. And yeah, so he was nowhere to be found because he died from the eruption, which is really sad. Even a lot of people died from the eruption, and that was really tragic. It even shows what the aftermath looks like. It was a disaster, and Spirit Lake is like what it is still. Yeah, so this was the tragic event story of Mount Saint Helens. Man, that was crazy. My dad told me that he saw the news back in 1980. Crazy. Well, there's been a lot of things going on, but you better keep your eyes open. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the like, send some comments, and hit the bell button for brand new videos, and I'll see you next time. Peace out, everyone.